Jack.
Levi.
The Book Club from Hell.
It's been a really long time since we've done a Ted Kaczynski episode. We did our second episode ever, which I don't know if I recommend people go back to listen to, but if it was the second thing we ever recorded together, that was on the Unabomber Manifesto. So we're coming back to Ted Kaczynski to talk about his 2002 essay, The System's Neatest Trick. I think this is, of the things I've read of him, I think this is probably the most interesting. Granted, and this is this could describe almost anything he does. It is a reheated and slightly more autistic version of something that Jacques Ellul said, which Theodore J. Kaczynski was never shy about. I mean, in this very essay, he directly references Ellul's work, Propaganda, in talking about, I think it's integrative and agitation propaganda. Still, it's I do like The System's Neatest Trick.
Yeah.
Before I forget, though, I just want to point out to people listening that we do have a Patreon account. If you like what we're doing, head there, consider giving us a few dollars a month. We do weekly voice chats with people on Patreon. You get episodes early, you get access to bonus episodes. You also get to enjoy the moral victory of contributing money to this project. I also have a novel called Tower, the link to which will be in the show notes on Amazon. I've got a manuscript that I'm shopping around at the moment, so depending on when you listen to this, there might be a second novel out too. Anything you want to shill, Levi, before we continue talking about Theodore the Unabomber Kaczynski?
No.
Okay, so in this essay, which he wrote in prison, I'm pretty sure he wrote this one in prison because he was arrested in 95, and this was written in 2002. He basically sets out a mechanism by which what he calls the system, and we can talk about what the system is because he doesn't define it here, and in the footnotes acknowledges that he doesn't define it and did so for purposes of clarity and readability. But the system, which I think is effectively technological society as described by Jacques Ellul in the 50s, in his 54 work, The Technological Society. But how the system, in a decentralized way and in a way that is not planned by any individual person or any individual component within the system, can take rebellious impulses or frustrations and then repackage those, redirect them in a direction that benefits the system. And he sets out why activist movements, say gay rights, women's rights, trans rights, and so on, all end up serving the system, capital S, the system. Going into this one, Levi, were you aware of the system's neatest trick? Or how did you
I only
feel
knew
about
about the fact that he, like the, what's the book actually called? Technological Slavery.
Yeah.
I didn't know it because it's just one of the essays within Technological Slavery. But I've been wanting to read Technological Slavery for a while, so I actually read this essay, and now I've gone back to not the very beginning because I think he just rehashes his manifesto, at least in the copy that I've got. And yeah, I'm starting from.
Oh, do you have a copy of Technological Slavery?
Yeah. And it's just a PDF off the Internet Archive or something. And yeah, some of the chapter titles look really interesting. So
yeah. For those people who are not aware of Ted Kaczynski, which there's probably just almost no one listening to this who's not aware, but in brief, he was an American domestic terrorist. He was born 1942 in Chicago. He got a Bachelor of Arts in Mathematics at Harvard. He got an MA and PhD, both in maths, at Michigan. I think he taught at Berkeley as well, maths. Moved to a cabin in the woods in Montana in 1971, and between 1978 and 95, he probably providing an inspiration for Jeff Bezos in founding Amazon. He started a mail delivery service where he mailed or hand delivered bombs. He killed 3, injured 23 people, and he published a manifesto, which we've covered on this show, and which, among other things, sets out his reasons for why technology is destroying human autonomy and freedom, and why we need to really return to a time when the only technologies used by an individual are those which are entirely controlled by an individual, not dependent upon other people, so that individual retains full autonomy while using those technologies. And he really used his bombing campaign to get attention, and you converted that attention into people reading his manifesto, which remains.
It's kind of the predecessor
now
to modern prank streamers, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was a prank streamer.
Yeah, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. He's it took a bit of refinement.
Surprisingly less of a nuisance to society than prank streamers, though.
Johnny Somali.
Yeah, Johnny Somali. Oh, tragic. I just can't believe.
Yeah.
At least, if you ever think you're an idiot, at least you can just look at Johnny Somali and be like, well, I'm not that much of an idiot.
It was particularly when he went to South Korea. It was like, yeah, let me harass the population. A population of people, at least all of the men who have served in the military. I'm not sure if
aren't all
also have
South
served in the
Korean
military.
men supposed to do training in the military? And,
yeah. So it's just one of the last places in the world that you want to go around and harass strangers because
I would imagine a lot of
they're
women
trying
have
to
done it
fuck
as well.
you up.
Yeah. It's well, he did it in Israel as well, right? It's literally not just the men.
Israel?
He pulled the same crap in Israel. He sexually harassed a female army officer in Israel, and they basically had to stop from snapping his neck on the spot. Idiot.
Anyway, yeah.
So Johnny
he's directly
Somali,
inspired by
Ted Kaczynski. Same ilk.
Yeah. And this essay was written in 2002. I'm not sure if it was published or just sent to someone as a letter afterwards. Not that I would ever open a letter from Ted Kaczynski, but
That's exactly who I want to receive a letter from.
Large portions of technological slavery is actually his correspondence with people while he was in prison. So obviously enough people were willing to open things sent through the mail service from old Theodore. But technological
Could be some
slavery
Easter eggs or a box of chocolates. Could be a pipe bomb.
It was published in 2008. It's basically a collection of correspondence from prison. I think revisions to his manifesto, response to criticism, further work on the ideas from the manifesto. The first edition of it was published by a French publisher, Xenia, under the title The Road to Revolution. Had a second edition from Feral House, which is a US publisher.
That's the copy that I've got, is Feral House.
Technological Slavery, the collected writings of Theodore J. Kaczynski, aka the Unabomber. Then there are the third and fourth editions, published by Fitch and Madison, also from the US, also published as Technological Slavery. Volume 1, because the third and fourth editions were expanded quite a bit, hence why they've been split into 2 volumes. However, Volume 2 is still incoming, no announced publication date.
He's getting pretty old now. He should publish soon.
No, he's dead. He hanged himself in prison.
Okay, well, that's very old. That's the oldest you can get. He's dead old.
He's moved on to the world of being.
When did he die? Oh, wait, I feel like I remember. It was pretty recently. Yeah, pretty recently. COVID didn't get him, did it? Or he just died?
I think he committed suicide in prison.
Oh, okay, yeah, fair enough. He was in there quite a while.
Yeah. Yeah, he was serving a few life sentences. Gave him a lot of time to write. Like, he was prolific.
So he has written the second volume of Technological Slavery. They just haven't published it yet.
I don't know. I'm pretty sure the material exists because he expanded it. And that's why it was decided to be published in 2 volumes, but no release date announced for volume 2.
Presumably,
if I'm
Feral
wrong,
House.
And someone from Madison and Fitch is listening, please please correct me and please send me a copy of Volume 2 because I actually will read it and talk about it.
Preferably signed.
Yeah, signed with a Ouija board by Ted.
Yeah. So I'd actually be interested in reading some of the other essays. I'm going to read it anyways. So if you want to do an episode at some point on any one of the other essays, it might be good. I think doing an episode on the entire book is probably unnecessary, but doing it on like one or two select essays would be interesting. So anyways, back to the question you asked me about, like, what did I think going in? And I'll hand it over to you to give your response. I am very pro technology, so reading anti-technology stuff is good for me to like get a different perspective. I think that I'm hoping after reading this essay that this series of essays will be a bit more coherent than his manifesto, because his manifesto was all over the shop. Like still interesting ideas and stuff, but I would be particularly interested in reading like Jacques Ellul's stuff. And that would be good. Yeah, I think there was somebody else who's like pretty anti. There's quite a few anti-technology people, but it was Ellul and was it Mumford? Is somebody else you said? Is he anti-technology or he's just explanatory?
I wouldn't. Mumford is, so he was less despairing than Ellul, who I think particularly also because of his Christianity felt that the material world was Satan, and so was disinclined to be very positive about it. Mumford was, I don't know if I'd call him anti-technology. He just acknowledged that it could have downsides, and it affected us just as much as we affect it.
Yeah. So I'm thoroughly indoctrinated into the world of tech bro accelerationist utopianism, I suppose. Although I'm not a utopian.
Esoteric tealism.
Esoteric tealism and Trumpism. So it's for the purposes of just engaging with somebody who's highly critical of that worldview, it's helpful. Just because it's very easy to just get into an echo chamber of things that I agree with, whether it's on social media or the books that I read. So occasionally letting in a critique is probably a healthy thing.
Yeah.
What about you, Jack? What were your thoughts going in?
So I'd read this quite a while ago, so I wasn't going in blind. I'm trying to remember what it was that made me read it in the first place. I'd heard somewhere that this is one of his more interesting essays, and I'd agree with that. I think it is. I was looking forward to reading it because I found the manifesto actually like very readable and pretty lucid and very straightforward. And this is similar. It's quite like, it's not metaphysical. It's not counterintuitive. It's pretty concrete and, would I call it practical? Yeah, I guess in some ways practical compared to what I normally read.
Yeah. I was reading Agenda the last couple of years hasn't been particularly practical.
Yeah. And
sure it's been fun for you though.
Yeah, I was looking forward to reading something he'd written after the manifesto, so a more mature Kaczynski. And this was written quite a few years after he'd written the manifesto. I think I'm not anti-technology. I'm probably more suspicious of it than you are, or just the way that it does really compel human behavior. I guess in the same way that anything in our environment does. And it's always quite fun to hear Kaczynski complain about people at university, because despite how he spent so much time at universities and just seemed to really resent the people there, which does pop up here as well. It's not quite as barbed as his description of over-socialized leftists in the manifesto, but he still does get a few jabs in.
Yeah, he couldn't help himself, could he?
No, he can't help himself at all. I don't think he was a particularly pleasant man.
No, he doesn't strike me as a pleasant person to be around. For anybody who doesn't already know, which I would assume that most people listening to this podcast would already know, he was subject to the Harvard psychology experiments, right?
Yeah, I forget the name of the psychologist who performed them on him, but I think he was subject to something like 2 hours of experimentation by a notorious psychologist at Harvard who, I forget the exact experimental design. For people who want the precise details, listen to our episode on the Unabomber Manifesto. But I think in brief, the experiment was students responded to advertisements put out saying that they would, I think, talk to other students about their beliefs and debate their beliefs. However, what actually happened was the students would submit an essay, I think, talking about their beliefs, and would then be subject to extremely personal criticism at length. Again, Kaczynski endured something like 200 hours of this. I don't know why he kept coming back. Extremely personal criticism that the experimenters derived from these personal essays. So they got students to write in with their weaknesses and then exploited those weaknesses. I'm not sure what they were trying to prove. It sounds like a lot of those 20th century psychology experiments where it's like, oh yeah, if we just electrocute dogs repeatedly, they don't like it. And
just to see what will happen.
Yeah, we now have experimental evidence that dogs don't like being
there's also some I don't think he was it somebody else? Was it Marilyn? Was it the Mansons?
I don't know.
Subjected to acid experiments or something. Yeah. Anyway, so people
he might have been MK Ultra, which is another thing.
So yeah, Mr. Kaczynski, there is, or Dr. Kaczynski, I should say. There is always that question of if he hadn't been subjected to those things, that sort of treatment, would he still have become the Unabomber? Yeah, it's impossible to tell, but he has good reason to not like the Academy very much.
Yeah. Yeah, to the point where he started mailing them bombs.
Yeah.
So he opens up the system's neatest trick with a quote from Jacques Ellul from the Technological Society, which says, "The supreme luxury of the society of technical necessity will be to grant the bonus of useless revolt and of an acquiescent smile." Which more or less sums up this entire essay. So, what this essay is about is that you've got the system, and the system, again, like I mentioned earlier, it's not actually defined explicitly in this essay, but I think it's basically a modern, industrialized, technological society. A society which has been animated by the force of technology unleashed. I think he said it was really the Industrial Revolution, where the type of technology that he's concerned about took off. A technology that demands resource extraction to feed further advances in technology, which are then used to extract more resources, conduct more research in order to improve technology. You just spin that up. Human beings become more or less another input into a technological system rather than, I guess, ends to be served. Ellul talks about how technological society turns all ends into means. Everything is a means. And everything just becomes an entire cybernetic network just feeding itself. That's what I interpreted the system to be when he talks about the system here. You can jump in if you want and say if you felt the system was something different.
No, I think that gels with what I assume he meant the system meant. But that might also be informed by the fact that you've told me about Ellul's work.
Yeah. I mean, with that too, Kaczynski was very, very influenced by Ellul and also said as much. He talked about loving the technological society because he finally found someone who was thinking the same things that he was thinking. And so he was already primed to enjoy the book, and then I'm sure the book really, really influenced him further. I mean, he's quoting it at the very top of this essay, so he's not trying to hide his influence. And so it might be worth actually drawing on something from the Unabomber Manifesto before we get into this more, because one of the key drivers of the system's neatest trick is this diffuse frustration throughout a population of a technological society. And one of the main reasons people feel so frustrated is, Kaczynski says, the power process has been frustrated. So I'll quote from the manifesto as to what the power process is, and then just offer a few brief thoughts. So I quote, "Human beings have a need, probably based in biology, for something that we will call the power process. This is closely related to the need for power, which is widely recognised, but is not quite the same thing. The power process has 4 elements. The 3 most clear-cut of these we call goal, effort, and attainment of goal. Everyone needs to have goals whose attainment requires effort, and needs to succeed in attaining at least some of his goals. The 4th element is more difficult to define and may not be necessary for everyone. We will call it autonomy, and we'll discuss it later." So that's from fairly early on in the manifesto. And I think important for this, so you need a goal, and he says this goal, to be really fulfilling, needs to be something that you need. It can't be what he calls a surrogate activity. A surrogate activity is going to be a goal or an activity that is really, it only exists so that you have some goal to work towards. It exists merely for the sake of its own fulfillment. And he gives a rule of thumb to work out if something's a surrogate activity or not. He says, okay, if you had to devote most of your time and energy to just satisfying your biological needs, or eating, sleeping, having enough, having warmth, and so on, would you continue practicing guitar for 3 hours a day? Would you consider in your pursuit of marine biology, would you consider collecting entomological specimens? And he says, if you wouldn't, then that's a surrogate activity. He acknowledges that some people, there are some people for whom, I guess, playing guitar wouldn't be a surrogate activity. It's just so intensely necessary for them that even if they had to dedicate a huge portion of their time and energy to fulfilling biological needs, they will keep playing their scales. But that's very, very few people. So you've got your power process. You need a goal which is really fundamentally fulfilling, that isn't a surrogate activity. You need to be able to put in effort to get that goal. He says that he uses the example of leisure aristocrats whose biological needs were all met and they were bored, basically, and unhappy and in psychological distress because their power process was also subverted because they couldn't expend energy in attaining a goal or effort. You also need the goal to be attainable. He says there's a sweet spot, which kind of makes sense, that attaining the goal can't be 100% guaranteed. Otherwise, it's not going to be fulfilling. It can't be 0%. Otherwise, you just get frustrated and don't do it. It needs to be in some sweet spot. The autonomy aspect, he says, basically you need some way of determining what your goal is yourself and then working out a way to achieve that goal yourself. So it's not like, say you're in a production line. Sure, you're given goals and you have to expend effort to attain those goals. And those goals, I mean, if it's a production line and the company is profitable, and presumably there's a good chance of fulfilling that goal, of assembling whatever. But that doesn't fulfill the autonomy component. And he says not everyone needs autonomy in their power process, but most people do. And most people wouldn't be fulfilled just on a production line or at an Amazon fulfillment center. If you're one of the lucky few who can fulfill their power process in the Amazon fulfillment center, then you are the optimized human being for the 21st century. You have a bright future ahead of you. Anyway, so I feel like those two pieces of information are important in setting the stage for the system's neatest trick, because the first thing he says is there's diffuse frustration through society. And this is from the subversion of the power process. And so like right at the start of this essay, he sets out a few things. In the section, what the system is not. I'll briefly mention it, but I don't think it's as important. He basically says the system is not its individual components or the individual people leading it, like presidents or CEOs or police officers or soldiers and so on. They're simply its servants. These servants might have beliefs which conflict with the system, but they still serve it, at least exteriorly, even if interiorly they might not agree with everything. And the times when these people rebel against the system, so for example, if you've got a politician who's corrupt, or you have a police officer who just loves beating up suspects, these acts actually are diseases of the system. He says they're diseases of the system because what the system wants, in inverted commas wants, is maximal compliance without any interruption to the process of converting all ends into means, of converting everything into more material for greater technological complexity and greater efficiency. And police brutality or political corruption.
So a well-behaved, docile,
yeah,
civilian population.
Yeah, basically just getting people as close to machines
rights, as you can. Non-violence, and people engaging in not merely just engaging in economic activity, but I guess in particular engaging in technologization. Yeah.
Anything that contributes to that, because you can consume products that have been produced by technological means, which he would consider to be you're serving the system perfectly well by doing that,
by feeding it money and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Or not by saying please and thank you to ChatGPT, which is apparently costing OpenAI a bunch of money because they're just having to run all of those queries.
Wait, people are trolling on ChatGPT?
No, they're not trolling. It's like I say please and thank you to it all the time. Apparently, it costs money because it's additional compute they need, which doesn't serve any purpose.
Have they actually added up? Have they calculated how much it costs? It feels wrong
to be rude to it. My parents brought me up properly. I'm going to say please and thank you to ChatGPT. Sam Altman can't stop me.
Yeah.
That's my rebellion against the system.
They could probably get rid of that pretty easily, couldn't they?
Probably.
Like on the front end, just like snip it out before they send it back to the server.
What if it's important to the query?
Yeah, it could be important to the query. Yeah. What if you're asking about the etymological root of please and thank you, the historical use of the word, and you just can't have the conversation with the computer? I don't know what word you're asking about.
It's actually it's an unthinkable concept.
Yeah. Anyways, back to Kaczynski.
Yeah. So anyway, so the system is not any individual. Those individuals might have different beliefs to the system. And the system wants smooth functioning of itself. And at least at the moment, until we can be replaced by Tesla robots, human beings are really we're the medium in which the system exists. The system needs us as actuators, I guess. So you have individual diseases of the system, which the system doesn't want, and which are condemned, actually. And he says one way to see what the system does or doesn't want is by looking at the media, because I guess the system's goals are really those things which are expressed in public in aggregate. People tend to keep their anti-system beliefs to themselves. So he says, because of modern technology, and there can be modern telecommunications technology, modern transportation technology, and so on, you have a greater mixing of populations. And a consequence for the smooth functioning of the system is that you need people to be more tolerant of different races, ethnicities, religions, sexualities, and so on, because these people are going to be in greater contact. And if these people don't like each other, then that's going to impact the functioning of the system. So what do you do in that case? Well, the system now has a new need. If it has introduced all of these disparate populations to each other, it now has a need for those populations to be able to live with each other. And this feeds down into people's beliefs and which beliefs are publicly acceptable or not. Which is, I guess that's one of the really important points from this essay, that none of this is a conscious process. It's almost a Darwinian process of, in a very decentralized way, beliefs that are beneficial to the system are those which are most likely to survive. It's a very materialist explanation. So shout out to Moog, our favorite historical materialist. I'll read out a quote. I'll read out a few quotes in this episode because he writes in a very straightforward way. Like quite often I'm not going to be able to sum up something better than he's just written it, so I may as well read it out. So I quote: "The system needs a population that is meek, non-violent, domesticated, docile, and obedient. It needs to avoid any conflict or disruption that could interfere with the orderly functioning of the social machine. In addition to suppressing racial, ethnic, religious, and other group hostilities, it also has to suppress or harness for its own advantage all other tendencies that could lead to disruption or disorder, such as machismo, aggressive impulses, and any inclination to violence. Naturally, traditional racial and ethnic antagonisms die slowly. Machismo, aggressiveness, and violent impulses are not easily suppressed, and attitudes towards sex and gender identity are not transformed overnight. Therefore, there are many individuals who resist these changes, and the system is faced with the problem of overcoming their resistance." So, I guess that's he's setting the stage here. Now we get to the system's trick. How does the system deal with populations that require large-scale social changes to continue the process of accelerating technological complexity? So he says it's a bait and switch. The system can't stop people, at least not yet. Before you can CRISPR-Cas9 out the "I am frustrated" gene from every human being on the planet. How's the system going to deal with this frustration from rapid social change? It can't stop it. But it can redirect it. So what it does is it redirects it towards fighting activist issues. So say fighting homophobia, sexism, racism, and so on. So he says, when, for example, anti-racism or anti-sexism were not in the system's interests, these things were truly rebellious. But that's no longer the case because the system needs populations, say racially heterogeneous populations, to be able to live together, because you now have these groups interacting with each other much more because of technology. You need women in the workplace because they're more potential workers. And he doesn't go into the material causes of this. Presumably something has changed between 1950 and now, which means that women are needed in the workplace, which they weren't, I guess, in the same way in 1950. He uses 1950 as the example date. Maybe he'd say the particular jobs on offer now are ones that women can do too. So, or just greater numbers of women can do. So it's in the system's interest to have them as more workers and out of the home into the workplace. He says, so you've got this historical reason for why these activist issues are considered rebellious, because at one stage in the past, they were rebellious, even though they're not now, but they continue to be portrayed as rebellious so that people who are feeling frustrated can let their frustration out somewhere. They can rebel because they're frustrated, they want to rebel, and the system says, look, here are all of these activist issues which are rebellion, so go rebel in that direction. There are also a significant number of people who still resist the system's social changes. Say people who are just out and out racist or out and out sexists, and the system these people allow a target for activists, a feeble resistance to the system's social changes that deepen the spectacle that activists are engaged in to make them believe that they are truly rebelling. And then he says also you've got this phenomenon of activists bringing themselves into conflict with more and more and more people in the system, even those who do agree with the activists' demands or with the system's direction. Activists make increasingly outrageous demands, which allows the leadership of the system, say CEOs or political leaders, to follow behind this vanguard of activists who draw a lot of public ire and discontent and soak that up so that political leaders can follow behind and appear moderate in comparison while also serving the system. So that's much of how the system takes this impulse to rebel and then redirects it. I've got a bunch of quotes which I can read out, but I don't have to. Do you have much to add to that?
No, I think it's pretty terse. I mean, it's a pretty short essay, anyways.
It's a very short essay, yeah.
But you get to the point. But there was one point. Sorry, there was one point around. Unless I'm skipping ahead, but I don't think I am. Like, correct me if I'm jumping ahead too much. You can
skip ahead because, like, you skipping ahead will be going ahead like 200 words.
Yeah. Is an interesting point that he made, which is that you have the vanguard or more radical component of any particular movement, say radical feminists, and then you'll have more moderate feminists. And the radical feminists also serve as almost a distraction for the reactionaries, say, for example, in the 1950s or 60s, the conservative or traditionalist reactionaries against the feminist movement, their ire, their manifestation of this diffuse frustration in the population can be directed towards or channeled towards the radical feminists. Meanwhile, the moderate feminists come up the rear and bring along the social change, the pacification that the system wanted in the first place. So the radicals serve a function of creating a front guard for the moderates who are actually like causing the change. It was very interesting point. And you can see that even the example that he uses is Rush Limbaugh, the reactionary right-wing American commentator. So in Kaczynski's mind, this conflict between radical feminists or radical social justice warriors and the types of Rush Limbaugh or any of the other talking heads on the right, to him, it's just playing out, well, there'll be some more moderate point of view from a more moderate component of the social justice warrior side of things that'll end up just making the change anyways. Yeah.
Which I guess, I mean, from the perspective of, I mean, if you're even just going to look at that in the context of, say, the United States, I think Kaczynski probably does have a point. Like, of the issues that Rush Limbaugh was arguing against, which ones did he actually win?
Did he win anything? I don't think he won anything. I don't know.
But I think also it's interesting what Kaczynski's doing here, because he's saying what the system is basically doing is you've got the universal reservoir of frustration, and it's providing pressure release valves for people depending on whether they are for the social changes or against the social changes required by the system. Because if they're for it in some way, they're going to go into campaigning for activist issues. If they're against it, what the system has done is you've got this vanguard of radicals who are really the group that people who dislike the social changes can direct their ire towards, rather than directing it towards the system of technology itself. So you've got in both directions ways to deal with frustration, and neither of which actually are directing frustration towards the true cause of people's discontent, which is their reduced autonomy, being crammed together in gigantic population centres, having their identities erased, being turned into means rather than ends, and so on. So
it's. I don't want to get too much into criticisms until maybe we finish.
I mean, we'll get there pretty soon because it's not that long.
Yeah. Maybe I'll save it for a couple of minutes.
You only have to sit on that for 10 minutes or so.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's important. I mean, I've already said this. This is not coordinated or consciously coordinated. You'll have plenty of people who might not agree with. I don't know. We can pick one activist. Okay, like gay. You say gay marriage. Like you might have people who don't agree with it when it was a big debate topic, at least in Western countries. But Kaczynski says enough people, particularly in the media and in academia, will feel that these changes are inevitable because the system really wants these. And that enough people will behave in a certain way so as to make these things effectively inevitable. I guess I'll quote. For example, if a news magazine editor looks at the militia movement, he may or may not sympathise personally with some of its grievances and goals, but he also sees that there will be a strong consensus among his advertisers and his peers in the media that the militia movement is potentially dangerous to the system, and therefore should be discouraged. Under these circumstances, he knows that his magazine had better take a negative attitude towards the militia movement. The negative attitude of the media presumably is part of the reason why the militia movement has died down. And the obverse works as well. If you're enough of your peers and advertisers and so on are feeling positively about some particular cause, you're more likely to report on it positively. So the social conformity aspect of it too is important. I guess that's one of the major coordinating functions, or at least as he sees it, coordinating functions. Which in some ways it feels somewhat similar to when a friend of the show, Curtis Yarvin, talks about the cathedral. If people want to hear us talk about that more, we did an article on Curtis Yarvin talking about the cathedral, but he also said that basically you have decentralized movement in one direction. I'm not sure if it was Yarvin who said Cthulhu always swims left, or it might have been Spandrel, but something to that effect. Because the broad incentives and the incentives of drawing closer to power are such that most people most of the time will say things that further left progressive causes. And if you want to hear our problems with that, you can listen to the Yarvin episode. But this feels somewhat reminiscent of that. And I don't think it's totally untrue. I mean, I do think, obviously you can have plenty of cultural movements that don't have a conscious leadership. I think material circumstances have a huge impact on people's beliefs. So that aspect doesn't sound completely unreasonable. And then, of course, he complains about university academics. I've got quotes about him complaining about them. I don't know
how many times throughout this entire book do you think he complains about university academics?
I was sort of surprised he only had one section where he complains about academics. He said, that university intellectuals play an important role in this neatest trick of the system. They're not independent thinkers. They're over-socialized, extremely conformist, very tame, domesticated, intensely sensitive to what their peers are doing, which is not totally untrue. I think a lot of people on university campuses are intensely sensitive to campus status games, as I guess basically everyone is sensitive to status games within their own group.
Yeah, you could say the same thing of like people in corporates and
I don't think it's really any different.
Yeah.
But their impulse to rebel is particularly strong, he says, because they are so over-socialized. And because they're incapable of independent thought, they can't meaningfully rebel. Not like Ted Kaczynski going to his Montana log cabin and sending people pipe bombs.
What does over-socialized mean?
over-socialized.
Where's the line between being appropriately socialized and over-socialized? I guess in particular with regards to Ted Kaczynski thought.
Yeah. So he does talk about that in the manifesto. I can't remember the precise definition of over-socialization. I think it's particularly... So he connects it with leftism. And he says it's that the sense of intense guilt, the intense need to atone for wrongs that you feel you have done or your ancestors have done or your society has done. And the intense frustration that comes with that.
Yeah. Okay.
That and
with
also,
that
I think...
in mind, yeah, probably of all the sectors or parts of society, maybe universities are the most socialized.
Yeah. Yeah. I think also that we need to live in large cities, really high population density areas. We need to be intensely socially conditioned to suppress certain urges towards, say, violence or sexuality, which he says also leads to intense frustration. And university intellectuals, a notoriously violent group. Yeah. So because they are, and you laughing says that, they're not inclined to violence, which I guess for Kaczynski would mean that they have, they're even more socialized than most.
Yeah, with the exception, funnily enough, of violence or the threat of violence against people that don't agree with their narratives, whatever they might be, hyper-progressive narratives, existing on or near their campus, such as
so
Milo
do you mean like a
Yiannopoulos.
violent protest movement or something?
Milo
like that?
Yiannopoulos or...
But this is interesting. This is the system's Neatest trick in action.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So like you've got these intensely frustrated people, intensely over socialized with this simmering discontent, and then you give them something. You give them a place to rebel in a way that doesn't threaten the system at all. Like, throwing a brick at Milo Yiannopoulos is ultimately not going to fulfill the power process unless you are, I don't know, perversely fulfilled by throwing a brick at Milo Yiannopoulos.
I suppose so. Yeah, so with the exception of exactly that.
Yeah.
Being unreasonably hostile towards disagreements in perspective around reasonably fringe things, issue gripes. Universities are not the sort of places that I normally think of as intensely violent.
We should make it a thing. you and I, we should make it a thing. We should go to universities and encourage them to be more violent. This is more violent campuses. We need more just random acts of unplanned violence. Yeah. Like if your coffee's taking a bit too long if the barista's taking a bit too long, how about you firebomb their shop? Someone cuts in front of you in line, got to stab him.
just ramp up the reactivity and
reactive
violence.
Mandate carrying weapons on campus. You're not allowed there unless you
must take high doses of GHB in order to enter campus. Campus.
Yeah, you're not allowed to enter campus unless you're on a come down from a 3-day speed bender. You're feeling really ratty, and you've got your pistol on you.
Yeah, no,
to escalate any situation. So, anyway, the trick is not perfect. Kaczynski does say so that this neatest trick of the system isn't the only way that the system ensures, or its own orderly functioning, but it's a major one. But even this trick is not perfect. So he pulls from Jacques Ellul's book Propaganda, in saying that there are two types of propaganda, or there are many types, but for the purposes of this example of how the trick is not perfect, there are two types. So there's integration propaganda, It's this is really sort of background propaganda. It's designed to enculturate people. It teaches people to repress or sublimate impulses that are dangerous to the system and focuses on instilling long-term, stable, broadly applicable values. And then you've got agitation propaganda, which aims to bring out strong emotions regarding specific events or causes. And so how can these come into conflict? So, yes, most of the time the system requires a docile, non-violent population. Integration propaganda teaches us to be horrified by violence against humans, to value interdependence and cooperation. However, sometimes the system or a state requires its citizens or its subjects to be violent. So, say in warfare, and you need agitation propaganda to rev people up to want to inflict violence on other human beings, which runs contrary to integration propaganda. And an example of the system's trick backfiring is, say, pacifists who refuse to fight in a war. The integration propaganda has been too effective, so they rebel in a way that's not actually beneficial for the system by refusing to behave violently, refusing to respond adequately to agitation propaganda, or resistance to scientific experiments performed on non-human animals. These experiments are really beneficial for the system because it increases the store of scientific and technical knowledge, which can be used to produce more technology. However, the integration propaganda, teaching people to be horrified by violence, now comes into conflict with something that the system also desires, which are these scientific experiments. And he closes out this with an example of really how rebellion in academic settings is a sham. I don't know if we even need to read this bit out. Like, you can if you're very passionate about it, but it illustrates his points, but it's not offering new information.
He just gets to take a jab at academics.
Yeah, it's just more of him complaining about academics. I guess like the point basically made through the example is that almost always when a belief system is being mocked or ridiculed or held up as being in some way contrary to progress or not modern, it almost always is a form of a system of belief that existed, say, 50 years ago. So, say, he uses the example of someone who was intersex being told that they were cursed and given over to the devil, taken to charismatic churches to have the demon cast out, and so on, and mistreated. And Kaczynski says, actually, most people today, or at the time of writing in 2002, wouldn't agree with this treatment. Like, this is actually not something that is a commonly held belief now, but it is presented as a commonly held belief or a much more powerful force in society than it really is, to deepen the illusion of genuine rebellion. But again, all of that you could probably have gleaned from the preceding 4 chapters of this essay.
Yeah, chapters in quotes.
Yeah, I mean it's a brief essay. I think it's good that it's short.
It's fine. So do we want to jump into jumping off points?
Yeah.
Or criticisms?
Yeah. So what were you wanting to say earlier?
The main thing was, it just seems as though, so the 2 primary criticisms that I had of it. The first one was, it seems as though it's got that structure that I've noted before, which is, amongst other thinkers, is that there doesn't seem to be any way to falsify the construct they have. It's like everything that everybody does is a symptom of the system. Everything is the system. And when everything is the system, it kind of makes me think, what's going on here? And maybe that's just because it's such a brief. Maybe in the rest of the essays, he goes into more details, and his decision to not explicitly state what the system is contributing to that. But it's more like a red flag. And again, just because it's so short, it's such a short essay, I don't know if that's I can take a strong stance on that. It's just it's giving off unfalsifiability bells, setting off my spidey senses on that front. And then the other one was that he seems to know intimately, or think that he knows intimately, the psychology and inner workings of other people's minds, even though he's been in prison for how many years at that point, and presumably isn't having conversations with advertising company executives. So he is making claims about what other people are thinking and their intentions, which I don't know where he, unless he's pulling it out somehow from, people are kind of essentially not robots, but so sufficiently or so deeply programmed, their autonomy is so undermined by the system that he thinks that he's able to make strong claims about, the inner workings of other people's minds. Which, when I was reading, like when he was saying, "Oh yeah, this advertising company or this television studio executive wants to do this and wants to do that," the first thing that just came to mind for me is just, how do you know that's what they want?
But I guess you could then, couldn't you then make that criticism of anybody trying to describe anybody else's activity?
Except in this particular case, he still at this stage spent much more of his life out of prison than in prison. I guess so, but it seems to me like it's more putting words and assigning intentions to other people on the assumption that what he's saying is already the case. Like this is whether it's an advertising executive or whatever, just say, well, no, that's not how we think.
I guess they could, but he also says, because I want to get to the unfalsifiability thing too. I think what he's basically saying is people respond to the incentives put before them. And he says much of the time the incentives put before people, so say, if someone is interested in keeping their job, like if you're an advertising executive, are you going to make a heroic stand based on your beliefs, or are you going to, in most cases, will most people keep quiet about things that they believe if they feel it's going to keep their livelihood? Like, yeah, probably. I think that's fairly likely. Like, I don't need to interview specifically a bunch of advertising executives to say that people respond to incentives.
Yeah, but the issue is that the sincerity of, like, maybe that's part of it, but also maybe they actually do just believe what they say they believe. It's not some other thing to like, to keep the system chugging along. Like that might be the effect.
but I think he's saying it's the effect. He says pretty explicitly, like, they may or may not sincerely believe it, and many probably do sincerely believe it. But I guess those beliefs are probably downstream of their material conditions. So the conditions in which they were educated and then brought up. Which is, I mean, it's this is not to say it, like, this makes it correct, but that's also a fairly common refrain you hear all over the place, that, say, beliefs or the ability of a belief system to survive is really, really contingent upon the material conditions in which it exists. In terms of unfalsifiability, I'm trying to think, because he says, or at least demonstrated ways in which he felt you could rebel against the system. So I don't think he forecloses on any ability to determine what is or isn't rebellion. He just says that Like a lot of stuff that is held up to be rebellion isn't. Because I guess one way you could determine if something is or isn't genuine rebellion is, does it further greater technological complexity? So say you go around bombing power plants. Like that's probably genuine rebellion in that it's extremely societally disruptive. So I think is that what you meant by unfalsifiable?
Yeah, I guess except in extremely destructive. So like what? So why isn't I guess it seems as though any social activity or social unrest, short of I guess that sort of destructiveness is hard to say that it doesn't conform to this schema.
Yeah, I don't think that makes it unfalsifiable. I just think it means that you would need to think a lot about how it impacts a technological society.
Like if you were... So is it anything other than going directly after, like a social movement other than... So for example, a social movement that is just about detechnologizing, but not necessarily being destructive, but explicitly about detechnologizing.
Yeah, I think that would qualify as genuine rebellion if it led to material results, like people actually becoming less reliant on. I forget the precise terminology he uses, but he distinguishes between technologies that, say, you as an individual control the entire process of producing and using. You're not relying on anyone else, and those technologies are okay. Technologies that depend on huge populations making, with specialized knowledge, and you as an individual can't control every aspect of them. Like, I don't produce electricity to run my computer. I didn't make the computer. And that form of technology is problematic for him. So I guess if a movement were to reduce the use of that latter form of technology, I think that would be genuinely rebellious, at least according to him.
Yeah, but all other things, if they don't either directly or indirectly contribute to detechnologization, they reinforce the system.
Yeah. Yeah, to greater or lesser extents. But again, I don't think that... So from his perspective, the technologization is so deeply embedded in society that, yes, it is like it is going to be extremely widespread. And those behaviors which are easier to perform are much, much more likely to further it. But I don't think that makes it unfalsifiable to say that it's very hard to rebel. I just think it means that it's hard to do. But also, I'm trying to remember. I should read the manifesto again. Or maybe I'll just read A-Law. Because, I was saying to you before recording that it's one of the biggest problems I have with the Unabomber is he's not more interesting than his influences. So I find A-Law talks about many of these things, but in a more sophisticated way. I guess in many ways that Kaczynski was polemical. Like, he was wanting people to read these things and go out and just do stuff based on reading these things. By do stuff, like even just terrorism. He was wanting people to resist the technical society. A-Law also wanted people to resist, but his resistance was very different. It was ultimately, I think, becoming a Christian. And as a Christian, exercising presence in the modern world, but which is its own thing. That'd be a really cool book to cover. I like that one a lot. But it's a very, very different form of resistance to Kaczynski. And because of Kaczynski's materialism, he is just wanting people to read straightforward works of his and go out and enact them, which is a strength and a weakness. I guess if you're wanting people to do things, it's good. If you're interested in more theoretical aspects behind it, it's a bit of a weakness that it's more terse, and there's less to it. That said, given how much he resents academics, that he might have considered that to be something fairly positive.
Yeah, and Jacques Ellul doesn't strike me as somebody that most people are going to go and read and then act on.
No, it's... Most of what he wrote was kind of... Well, the Technological Society is pretty dry. And then acting on it is... it's Christianity. He wants you to become a Christian. A Christian anarchist. And not be as in the thrall of the material world of Satan, which is a totally different direction to Kaczynski. It's also one reason why I prefer reading Ellul than Kaczynski, because although I'm not a Christian, at least Ellul leaves open actually something quite hopeful. So he's extremely pessimistic about the material world, but very optimistic about your ability to be spiritually saved, whereas Kaczynski is, because of his straight materialism, the technological world is terrible. It's very, very hard to leave, and leaving it means living in a hut and using Stone Age technology. Which, at least to my mind, granted, I've gone to university, I've grown up in a technological society, sounds pretty pessimistic. It sounds pretty bad.
Yeah, I don't think most people have the have the, even if they wanted to, have the knowledge about how to survive under those circumstances.
Because then the question too is, and I think Kaczynski does just address this elsewhere, what is he trying to achieve with reducing the power of technological society? And I think it's his idea of autonomy. But do you ever feel for what he's trying to do, if he feels like there's some human dignity which is innate, which is destroyed by technology, which needs to be preserved, or human autonomy itself is the highest good, or even it's affective, because he always talks about how it's frustrating and dispiriting to live in a technological society. Because of his materialism, I'm not sure how effectively Kaczynski can respond to a purely technological solution to the affective problems of living in a technological society. Because couldn't you then say, let's just gene edit out everyone's ability to feel distressed at living in a highly technologized environment, which would solve the problems that Kaczynski is pointing out. And I think this is also...
Sorry, what was the question?
It's like, what's he trying to achieve here? What's motivating him? Because I'm not sure why there couldn't be highly technological, highly distressing solutions, at least distressing to us, to the problems he's pointing out, like to frustration and discontent from a frustrated power process. Well, why not, with enough technological know-how, just engineer people so that they don't feel distressed at a subverted power process?
I can't speak specifically to that because maybe nobody asked Kaczynski that and he never considered it.
I'd be surprised if he didn't consider it, because it feels so obvious of like, well, what are you doing this for?
Yeah. I mean, just with regards to like, why don't we just edit out? Why don't we just zap people's brains or something so that they don't have that impulse anymore? But with regards to the sort of why is he doing it, if I can try to put my as much empathy as I can have, it seems as though to me what he's talking about with autonomy is maybe I'll start from the opposite. The opposite is the Borg from Star Trek. It's the hive mind, the biological and cognitive fusion of people into a mass of sort of quasi-independent actors that are actually all diffusely interconnected with one another and insofar as that interconnection means that they are not, in some sense, true individuals, I suppose, they don't have autonomy. So it's this mass congealing integration of people into, like a network of interdependence. But I suppose, importantly, dehumanizing interdependence. And that, I guess, undermining innate human drives around, for example, like providing for oneself and engaging in the power process. There's this, you're born into the society where this is how you survive, this mass interdependence, but that's actually deeply, deeply frustrating. And it seems to me like, for himself at least, he realized that, or that's what his explanation was for his deep sense of dissatisfaction with the world, and why he went into the woods, and thought, well, does he just stay there in isolation? I suppose during the intervening time between when he went into the woods and when he started doing his domestic terrorism campaign, he obviously came to the point where he wasn't just content with isolating himself and exiting society himself, but actually thought, no, well, I've got to do something about this.
Yeah, I think it was there was a part of the woods he really liked, and someone built a road through it.
Right.
And
so nothing was safe. Nothing was sacred
nothing was
for him.
safe.
Yeah, it was going to comfort him whether he stayed in the woods or not. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think it makes sense that it's particularly autonomy, which is the really, really important thing for him. I guess the question is, why is autonomy? Why then autonomy? Why is that so important?
Why is that so important? Yeah, so
because
I guess
for him, it oftentimes gets down to it's distressing
to not be autonomous.
But it comes back to my point where there are technological solutions to that as well.
Yeah.
Which is one of the parts of Kaczynski's worldview that I struggle with.
There must be some tacit assumption in the way that he's thinking that, for lack of a better word, I can only think of as spiritual. I think there's a spiritual component to human existence that is undermined even by your solution.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I think it's why I say Elul with his Christianity very easily gets out of it.
Made it explicit.
Yeah, whereas with Kaczynski, because he's very much a materialist atheist. You do have that ghost floating around in his philosophy, which I feel too. I would feel like, say, borging human beings, just removing your ability to feel frustrated at a lack of autonomy is repulsive. The thing is, if you, like Kaczynski, just foreclose on, I guess, anything but the material, it becomes kind of hard to run away from that, to just remove your ability to feel distress and you fix the problem.
Yeah, get some soma or some lobotomies or something going on. Yeah, it seems, and even if you said, well, what if the person opts in? It's not even done without their consent. They actually say, yeah, give me, remove this part of my brain. I don't want to feel frustration anymore. Still seems intuitively repulsive.
Yeah, it feels like the sort of thing that you can't meaningfully consent to. Or it's even, is consent.
I'd be questioning their judgment.
Yeah. It's almost the catch-22 from the novel. Yeah. It's like if you can only consent to it if you're sane, but if you consent to it, you're insane.
Yeah. There's people out there trying to kill me. I don't want to go out there. Yeah.
I guess because I do like reading Kaczynski, but my problems with him almost always come back to the point I've been talking about for the past few minutes, that
I'm trying to come up with a good answer to you, but I can't.
His problems ultimately, they don't foreclose on technological solutions to them. And I'm not quite sure how he would argue against the Borg solution.
Okay, so maybe we're misinterpreting his problem situation then. Like maybe autonomy is a component of it, but we're taking it as perhaps too axiomatic. Or
he was a mathematician. He was 100% axiomatic.
But like even within maths, there's like systems that you can't prove the truth of. Or there's true statements in systems that are not derivable from the axioms of the system. So maybe this is one of those things where he's just like, this is just the case. I take it as an axiom that this is better for people. And I'm not going to ask questions beyond that.
Which
say it's self-evidently true.
I think basically all human knowledge ultimately gets down to this. Just you have your unspoken first principles, which are true because they're true, and you build things on the basis of those.
Or even if they are spoken, sometimes just go, well, yeah. That's where I'm coming from. And maybe he's just to give him benefit of the doubt, he's gone, well, to me, this seems really obviously the case that autonomy is extremely good in the sense that I'm talking about it. And I'm going to just keep on doing my thing until other people wake up and see that the root of their eternal frustration with the world, their diffuse non-specific anxiety during their existence in a technological society is caused by what I'm saying is the cause.
Yeah. Depleting all of your dopamine on gacha games.
Sorry, I couldn't come up with a better answer for you than that.
No, but that's I can't come up with a good answer either, and it just feels like the black hole at the center of Kaczynski's entire project.
He just took it for granted.
Yeah. Which,
maybe,
like, if someone just comes out and says, there's just my ground truth, I'm actually fairly comfortable saying, okay, fine, because again, like I've got a bunch of those things myself that I can't really explain. That that are just true because I like them.
Yeah, or the other thing is, well, at least from a Popperian, I don't know if I should use the word Popperian, but the theory of epistemology as explained by Popper and Deutsch and other people who in that sort of post-Popper tradition is they just say, like, all knowledge is conjectural. You take a guess at something and you say, well, this is my guess. And sometimes your guess has got some merit to it, and sometimes it doesn't. But even Popper would say, all knowledge is conjectural and all knowledge contains errors. And so the issue of becoming, getting closer to truth, so to speak, is an issue of the process of error correction rather than just having a guess outright from the beginning being the correct thing. And in this case, Kaczynski is, one of his conjectures is human autonomy is paramount of all the different ethical values and concerns. He's going to put it in a kind of supreme position against others.
Yeah, I'd say that's fair. So do you have any... Actually, would you recommend this before we close?
It's very short. I'd recommend it.
It's super short. It's probably 2,000 words, 3,000.
Because, okay, so we didn't talk about what was good about it. I think one of the things, I don't feel as though I spoke too explicitly about, is that I do think he is making a decent point that sometimes these anti-establishment trends are just really, really establishment. The most ironic one I see is, communist anti-capitalist websites, selling merch.
I do. A lot of activist movements tend to move in lockstep with international capitalism.
Yeah, and I think that there's lots of obviously different types of capital, but I guess in particular what people tend to be really particularly upset about is the type and scale of aspects of modern capitalism and its growth and that sort of thing. And unless you exit the system to some degree, like the Amish, and just say, okay, we're only going to interface with it in a very limited way. I kind of don't see how even just having a website for your communist cause is like, well, you're using this massive capitalist infrastructure in order to do that.
And that I don't have a big problem with that, in that, okay, sure, you use the tools available to you to advance your cause. I guess where Kaczynski gets really interesting, and I think where you're going with this, is where the use of those tools starts to condition your beliefs. And your existence within that system starts to condition your beliefs.
Which of course it would. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot to that. I do think like the material circumstances, of course, affect what you believe and affect which particular memes and memeplexes are more competitive than others.
And just to clarify, when you say the material circumstances, you're talking about, say, what are the means of production in a particular, what sort of wealth is there, what sort of capital is there, what sort of consumer goods are there.
Yeah. And also just what options are available to you.
What options are available to you.
Modern telecommunications technology.
That's why I like the word problem situation rather than just saying somebody's problem. I think it's like, every problem exists within like a broader context. Every person has a problem, and that problem is, contextual. There's not, sort of a person out there floating in the abyss that is just having a situationless problem that they're trying to solve.
It's a contextless problem.
Yeah. And I think in this particular case, with respect to what you've just said, obviously the material circumstances of anybody's life is going to be a huge part. If I could boil it down, not to be too reductionist, but boil it down to only two things, which I don't know is fair, but just say for the time, it just seems like you can get somebody's context to categorize any aspect of somebody's context into either their material circumstances or their culture or some intersection of the two.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe there's something I'm missing on that one, but I don't know, I'm not sure.
Well, yeah, it has a massive impact, because I guess what resources are you using to come up with ideas?
Yeah.
Even the symbols you're using to reason about these things are not are very unlikely to be ones that you've just made de novo.
Yeah.
You're born into a particular symbolic order.
I suppose even if I try to draw a very long bow, I don't know if this is too much of a long bow. Our material, so like everything that's been made, started as an idea in somebody's head. And so, a great example being electricity, right? It took Maxwell and whoever else to figure that out. So our material circumstances are also the manifestations of some underlying theories and ideologies and so forth. So you could also think of it as like this, your material circumstances. If you're responding to something in your material circumstances, you're also kind of implicitly responding to the ideas and ideology somewhere back in the chain of causality that gave rise to your material circumstances as well. Which in this case, with Kaczynski, you'd be thinking, well, the underlying ideology, as you mentioned, is something around like everything is now a means, including other people. They're no longer an end in and of themselves, which is what this morass of material circumstances is sort of implicitly conveying to everybody in a technological society.
Yeah, and it's a massively cybernetic system as well, because those beliefs or those ideas were created on a background of material circumstances, which are the result of ideas. So it's just this gigantic feedback loop,
like
spinning back to I don't know, like before humans existed.
Yeah. Well, I guess who was the first person to pick up a stone and use it in a technological way? And not like how chimps pick up sticks and like dragging them behind them and stuff, which I can only assume is I mean, it could do. I mean, okay, there was some qualitative difference at some point with our ancestors where they did something beyond what the chimps do with sticks.
Yeah.
And was it all cooked from there?
And that was the beginning of the fall. That was our out of Eden moment.
Yeah.
Before, during our pre-lapsarian days, and we were just dragging around sticks without any sort of goal orientation.
Because the interesting thing about people, right, is that other animals seem to have some degree of culture, like the chimps dragging around the sticks. I don't know if that's genetic. That might be cultural. But there's something about the mind of a person that has some other component where we engage with our culture in a very different way, constantly creating new culture. And yeah, I guess it's like living in a technological society is, you really are living in a it's like I guess the way I'm feeling right now is, what would it be like for a hepatocyte, a liver cell, to become aware that it was a liver cell in the liver as part of this like larger thing? Would it start mailing bombs along the bottom of a tree
to destroy the liver and free itself?
Not that it's a bubble. It's more like I guess it's an organism unto itself. Hey, it's like it's as what's the term that I've heard before? Superorganism. Yeah, you're one tiny little node in this massive superorganism that, like ultimately is way more powerful than you. It can crush you, like we saw in COVID in our lifetime, or like we're seeing in other people's lifetime. Okay, here's a counterpoint just before we wrap up the episode. What about the way that the Forest Passage, Ernst Junger, like confronts the same problem, or same kind of problems? It's like this interiority against, he's saying his autonomy and his is like maintained in his ability to be detached interiorly from his ideological circumstances.
Yeah, and I think that really, so I would be very surprised if Kaczynski directly addressed this. I can only infer, but I guess this comes down to Junger's division of the world into a world of becoming and a world of being. How you have, it really is through access to an unchanging world of being, or an internal world of being, that you are able to be free. Because otherwise you too are just completely subject to material circumstances, to the system's tricks. It's only if you have that unchanging point of comparison that you can internally be free. Which is probably a stronger argument than Kaczynski's, right? It's a more compelling way of thinking. I don't know, it's more cohesive. It's more at least internally coherent. Because we just reached the same problem with Kaczynski that we've run into a few times of, sure, autonomy is really, why is autonomy so important? And why can't there be a technological solution to distress at frustrated autonomy? If you have an unchanging world of being as a reference point, as Junger does, when you move into the forest through the use of symbols left behind by others, you have that point of comparison against the changing world that allows you to make those sorts of judgments, which I'm not sure how you do with Kaczynski. Maybe he did believe in an unchanging. Okay, have you read the whole of Technological Slavery? No, I've only read this from Technological Slavery. I'll be very surprised if he addressed the being becoming distinction. You know what, to be honest, I just wouldn't be surprised if a way to approach it is just to think, a purely materialist approach to this problem is actually insufficient. You've actually taken out too many factors from your understanding of the world to form a cohesive way of thinking about it. And potentially. I'm not sure. Yeah. I feel like Junger's solution is more satisfying. At least internally, according to its own logic. Yeah, I guess I can't help but just think, at some point you just have to make a call like, this is what I believe in Kaczynski's case. Just like, I just think that this is bad. And I'm not going to stand for it. Which he did. Like, the man suffered the consequences of making that decision. I mean, a lot of other people did too when he mailed them bombs, but he was convinced.
So just before we wrap up the episode, because obviously it's such a short book, you could have read it. You could have read it a few times, a couple of times in the time that you've listened to us. So one last interesting point, I guess I'd like to ask you. We don't have to drag on too long, but what's now that you've read Allul and Mumford and coming back to Kaczynski and stuff, and any other people you want to bring in? I don't know what else you've been reading recently, but what's your perspective on this idea of the systems, technological society, technique, and these things that these thinkers bring up? And where's your thinking come to at the moment around, is it good or bad? Is it escapable, inescapable? Should we try to escape it? What's our relationship with it? What's your relationship with it? Where are you standing at the moment?
It's just such a gigantic question. I can't really answer it adequately. So in terms of, does a technological society exist? One that is maybe not exactly the same as that described by Allul or Kaczynski, but one similar enough. Probably. I think even just from a Darwinian perspective of memes, people using increasingly complex forms of technology tend to outcompete those who don't. And then when you get that technological system and smashed together with capitalism, where really interacting with technology in more efficient ways gets you more resources in a really fluid way. It does feel like there is this internal logic to it that tends towards greater technological complexity, bringing more resources or converting more of the world into resources for greater technological complexity. As to whether it's good or bad, I guess it's just too complicated to say in a blanket sense, one way or the other.
Bad facets.
Yeah. I mean, there are people are very sensitive to the bad bits, of course, even in very comfortable positions like in the West, our attention is being stolen away by algorithmic social media. Much of the work we do, I think, is kind of time wasting and keeping people tired rather than making things of value. And really exists just to feed more resources into a massively interconnected system. And then, we've talked about drone warfare on this podcast before, but that's another obvious horrifying aspect of increased technological sophistication. Then there are a bunch of really good things, like
this podcast.
Like this podcast,
yeah.
Like childhood vaccination. There are plenty of things that are that are really good about it. It does beg deeper questions that I feel like we try to avoid using technology. So, the old chestnut of why are we here? I feel like a lot people have been throughout human history either trying to address the problem or trying to avoid the problem. And I feel like, a chief means of trying to avoid the problem today is just burying our head in technological utilitarianism and saying, oh, well, if we make some particular number go up more, or if we just make more sophisticated technologies, or if we just learn how to live forever, then that's, I guess, a good enough replacement for why are we here, or any sort of metaphysical interrogation of human existence. That might not be necessarily a problem fundamental to technology and more just human beings. I'm not sure, but that sort of spiritual corrosion does seem to be increasing as technological societies deepen. It's a very, very loose collection of thoughts in answer to your question, but I just don't know how to answer it in a terse way.
No, I mean, I've asked you this or similar questions a number of times over the last few years, and it's just interesting to see how your thoughts are evolving. I saw, I'm normally pretty pro-capitalism, and I think I have fairly good reasons for it, but, it's also important to think about, capital, capital, and capitalism, and the ideological infrastructure that enables it, like property rights, private property rights, and limited liability corporations and that sort of stuff, doesn't exist in a vacuum. It coincides with other aspects of our culture or cultures, especially like a more interconnected world. It exists like obviously within the biosphere, so there's considerations around how it interacts with other aspects of the biosphere, and I think, except for maybe Hans Hermann Hoppe, would be
100% correct, as endorsed by Book Club from Hell.
Although I'm sure even he would be like, a community should have right to like self sovereignty over directing the capital and all that sort of stuff, but just letting it rip completely without any constraints or considerations does seem intuitively to be would be a misguided thing to do. And I'm just thinking about this because we went and saw Ocean by David Attenborough, his most recent film. Hopefully not his last film, but probably his last film. And it was like a great reminder of just when you let capitalism just rip without any without a proper oversight and thinking about other aspects of society. And in this case, they show this footage of like the ocean trawlers just mass carnage and destruction of the ocean floor. And then they throw back like 95% of what they catch. And the only reason why they can get away with that is because the ocean's not being protected properly, and they're not being forced to pay for the externalities of what the damage that they're actually doing. So they're actually inflicting a bunch of damage and they're not paying for it. And when you see it directly, you say, well, obviously that's just clearly not a good thing. We just shouldn't rip up the ocean floor. But if you just let capital rip with no other considerations, you just have that all over the place. We'd have no whales. All the like forests in Tasmania would be gone by now. The old growth forests,
what have they
all
done
these sorts of
recently?
things. And if you just think about okay, well, what about the impact, the externalities of this stuff on like the human condition itself, rather, not just the biosphere, but the human condition itself. You think about sort of alienation, isolation, this mass sense of like, I guess, overwhelm, all these sorts of things. I don't know. Where am I going with all this? I'm saying that
Levi's now a communist.
I'm not a communist.
I'm being a dickhead. I think it's one thing.
I don't know. It's just trying to think through this is more complicated than perhaps I think at times on the show maybe I've not necessarily revealed that I sort of go pretty hard on the capitalist stuff. Because normally in my social context, I'm surrounded by a bunch of anti-capitalist people. But recently I've just been thinking more about not being so reactionary and just trying to think through. Sorry, what were you going to say, Jack?
Well, it's one aspect too of increasing technological power is that it magnifies basically any impulse it comes into contact with, including carelessness. And so, sure, you probably have the same human carelessness at work when someone goes fishing in a pond with like a bit of string tied to a stick.
Yeah.
As you do with an ocean trawler. It's just with the trawler, our carelessness, the effect of the carelessness is magnified massively. Our desire for fish.
Yeah.
The effect of that is magnified. You get more fish, and carelessness, you absolutely obliterate the ocean floor.
Like leverage just amplifies like your good decisions and your bad decisions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which when you're on the receiving end of the misuse of vast amounts of technological power and leverage, you don't stand a chance. You're just going to get rolled over. Like with unbelievable amounts of kinetic energy or whatever it is. What's what's that line from The Two Towers where the King of Rohan is like, what are men to do in the face of such evil? Looking at the Uruk-hai. It's overwhelming. It's if I think about it too much. But at the same time, if you just think about the negative aspects of it, of course it's overwhelming. But then again, we're also like I'm living in a nice warm house in Hobart, and we're going into winter, and we've got this podcast and stuff. So it's not black or white, is it?
Yeah, there are a bunch of problems that have been solved actually for most people, that have just been solved so effectively we don't think about it. It's like, I don't die from cold in winter. That's never happened to me in my life.
Or from a cut, like we've got penicillin. So
yeah. So I'll have to be an enlightened centrist ultimately in answer to your question. So it's got good and bad aspects.
Boring centrist. Yeah.
I was going to say, this. Would we recommend this? Yeah, I'd recommend this essay because it's so short. I think he is touching on things that are true, and it's one of the most interesting things of his that I've read. So yeah, I'd recommend it. Like, it's free on the Anarchist Library, or probably a bunch of other anarchist websites as well, because they tend to froth it over Kaczynski.
Yeah, I'd recommend it. Why not? It's like 15 pages.
It is, yeah. It's so short, and it was written by Kaczynski, which means he doesn't waste time. He's very straightforward. He'll often just like make a statement, then give an example. It's really easy to follow.
Yeah, and more generally, I'd probably just recommend everybody, given that if you're listening to this, you live in the technological society.
If you're listening to this after the collapse.
Chanting after the collapse. It's just good to engage with something critical of it. Somebody who's critical of it. Maybe some other people would be good to read as well, like Elul, who might give a bit more substance to it. But yeah, good.
Yeah. Cool. All right. See you next time. For everyone listening, if you've made it this far.
Thanks for listening.